Hi, my name's Elise Zoller and I'm a painter. I didn't start out as a painter. I grew up in a family of business people and engineers. And so I had a pretty technical background myself. I majored in architecture in college. I've always had a mind that really enjoyed three-dimensional objects. I used to draw cubes and cones and spheres all over my math homework because it just, like, when I would get bored, that's what I would do. In the beginning of my life, I worked as an architect for a few years. Then I went into business school for a while and I worked at American Express. I had a lot of different kinds of jobs, but never did I feel that I really belonged somewhere till I started painting. And there was something about painting that was like coming home, and it was like, oh, this is the one place where I'm not a fraud, where I'm actually real. Now, I did find work for lots of other people, but this job speaks directly to my experience as a human being. And one of my teachers was Paul Davis, and he said, as an introduction to the first course I ever took from him, he said, never let anyone make fun of you for being an artist. He said, because what you do is make a record of what it is to be human. And that really made sense to me. So what I do is try to communicate to you the experience I have of this enormous energy and light that lives in everything. And it's most easily explained on a white wall, visually, but it's in every building and everything you see. And sometimes it's really exhausting to me because there's just so much of it. But when I begin a painting, a great stillness comes over me, and I'm able to communicate it in a way that I haven't been able to do yet with words. And a little over a year ago, I embarked on a project to go to the smaller towns of Utah and paint what I call architectural landscapes. There's a map here of all the places that I went. I traveled down to St. George and all the small towns around there. I went up north to Huntsville and Camas, then Salt Lake itself. What really interests me as a painter is three-dimensional form and how surfaces reflect light off of each other. And the other thing that really interests me as a painter is places that people might overlook. And one of my goals in my work is to get you to notice things that you might not otherwise notice. And there's just a marvelous array of things around you that are teeming with light and life. And I'm hoping to help you notice that. Quality Cleaners is a painting that's particularly interesting to me because, well, actually they all do this, but it really shows you the reflection of light and how light bounces off. I picked Quality Cleaners in Springville for a couple of reasons. One is that I love design, just plain and simple. Two, plain and simple, I could stand in the shade, which is really terrific for me. And three, it was a quiet spot where I could come back day after day. Most of the paintings in this show are plein air paintings. They were started with a good solid 2 to 3 days of work outside, and then I finished them in the studio. The Quality Cleaner buildings, from a painter's perspective, is really interesting because it had overhangs, and it had overhangs that were white. And the cool thing about white is that there's nothing white about white. White reflects every light around it. And so that overhang was reflecting the sunlight coming from the road behind it. It reflected the grass, it reflected the pavement here, it reflected the tree over there. All those colors refracted off each other. And to me, that is absolutely fascinating. And I hope to you, a painting like this might cause you to stop and look at a shady spot where you were standing and suddenly notice some things like that. A really great example of it is the Marysvale painting. This is a house in Marysvale that I painted in July, and it was probably 102. I've never painted in weather that hot, and I did a very fast sketch. It took me like a couple hours, and then I took that back to the studio and worked on this. This painting really exemplifies what I'm talking about with light bouncing around. It's a completely white building, but if you'll notice inside the porch, there's white, there's orange, there's blue, there's green. It's reflecting everything around it, the trees, the grass, and look at the purples up there. I promise you, those colors are actually there when you go there to look at it. But you have to stand there for a couple hours to see them. And so, short of you guys doing that, I'm doing it. Edward Hopper always said that the one thing he just wanted to do was sit down and paint a white wall, and I pretty much agree with him on that count. Now this painting down here, Classic Cleaners, is a completely different take on that. So the cool thing about this Classic Cleaners scene is it's completely opposite from Marysvale in that this scene generated its own light. This is actually my third painting of the same scene because it took me a couple of versions before I got what I wanted. I painted it outside in the late afternoon, but it was still pretty sunny and the building was getting a lot of light on it. But with each painting I did, I took it darker because what I really wanted was what the sign and the lights did to the environment around it. That's the really interesting part to me. So you can see the sign here was pretty brightly lit with orange. You see how it bounces off the trees. It bounces down to the pavement. The sign here bounces to the bushes. I just took what I saw in a late afternoon and made it early evening because I thought the lighting would be a lot more interesting and communicate the movement of light. Plus, it's just an awesome place. So who wouldn't want to stand in front of it for a few hours? I did that with the Tatton Baird painting right next door to it as well. This painting is of the interior of a store called Tatton Baird, which is a haberdasher down in Springville. First of all, it's just an amazing place to stand, and to have permission to spend a couple of days there while they were working on hats, talking to customers about hats was fantastic. I was only there during the day, so what I did was I started this painting during the day and then I took it into the studio and I made it nighttime because I thought it would add the mystery of kind of an old trade to it, and I thought the lighting would be far more interesting than the sort of general broadcast light during the day. The other really interesting thing to me about this painting is I did a limited palette, so I only used ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and burnt sienna, and then white. The purpose of doing that was to have the whole painting hang together really well. It was a super fun place to be. It was somewhat of a difficult painting to do because there's a lot of repetition in it. I felt very lucky to have been able to be in that spot. So I really hope that you will come by and see the show because in addition to the paintings, there are stories next to each painting about what it was like to stand in each of these spots. It's a travelogue of what it was like to be in small towns of Utah, and it really was a pleasure, and I met a lot of great people, so I hope you'll come and see where they are. So I hope you'll come by Phillips Gallery and see the show. The gallery's open every afternoon, except for Sundays and Mondays, and you can look at the website to see all the paintings if you'd rather do it that way. I hope to see you here.